third and final part of episode number 6. So this is our top 5 that we're doing, and this is our top 5 favorite films. And I know this seems weird to a lot of people, let's define what we mean by our favorite films. When I say these are my favorite films, I don't think these are the best films.
Right.
I think Quentin Tarantino has made much better films than Kill Bill Volume 1. But there is something about that film that I love. It's a fantastic film. It's a film, basically these are films that I can sit down at any point in time. I could have watched them a week ago and I can watch them again today. It doesn't mean they're the best films ever made. I think some of these are near perfect films, and I think that could be argued that they should be in the, at least in the top 100 films that should be ever be considered, but I don't consider these to be the best films ever made. These are just my favorite films. Is that similar for you, or?
Yeah, I think the best way I can describe it is it's in a way it's in terms of enjoyment. Well, maybe not in terms of enjoyment, but just the list itself is similar to the top 5 guilty pleasures, with 2 big exceptions. The first one being I definitely enjoy all of these more than any of the films in my guilty pleasure. And number 2, we can defend these films. Like, these films are actually excellent films. Maybe not the best to some people, maybe not the best to others, but these are all excellent films and by their own merit.
Because I think we could have gotten really pretentious and made it look like we were art snobs and put a bunch of, hoity-toity.
Woolly Mountain. Stuff like that.
Mine, a couple Godard films, and we could have put some of that stuff on here, but no, we're just going with what we like. If you're new to our channel and kind of want to understand maybe our mindset when we're talking about films, and I don't think this has anything to do with what films we would like or dislike. I think you and I can like any film, regardless of whether or not it's in type to our favorite films. Sure. Yeah, this maybe if we lean a little too heavily in certain types of genres of films, maybe this will explain why. Then I'm going to go first with my honorable mentions. So I have 5 honorable mentions. So Big Lebowski, Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, Kill Bill Volume 1, The Matrix, and Oldboy, the original Korean. Yeah.
Oh, the Korean one. I figured you meant the Spike Lee film.
Oh, no, that's actually on my top 5 list. It's one of my favorites. Yeah.
Yes. That's a really good honorable mention. Speaking of The Matrix, did you see the new one?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What did you think of it?
That's okay. Had some interesting moments, but yeah.
That seems to be the vibe I get from anyone who's like a true fan of The Matrix, is just like, eh.
Like, I don't know. You can leave The Matrix alone. With everything that's happened with the creators of it, the subtext of that film has opened up, and there's so many things to think about whenever you're watching that film now. Like, it's not just, it's a great, amazing martial arts science fiction film, but the whole underpinnings of like, who are we and can we change who we are now that you know everything about the Wachowskis, that just it changes the entire subtext of that movie, and it's just like, to me, it's like a far more fascinating film because of that. So
all right, my honorable mentions: 1 we did today, Memento; also The Prestige, 2 by Nolan; A Few Good Men, The Lincoln Lawyer, and 12 Angry Men.
I assume you're talking about the original, not the Friedkin remake.
You're right. I still haven't seen the remake, which looks decent based on what I've seen as far as a made-for-TV movie goes.
It's got an amazing cast.
It does. That's why.
And I think Scott Baio's in it. But other than that, it has an amazing cast. So, yeah.
And Scott Baio.
So my number 5, and another thing I should say, my entire list, including honorable mentions, on any given day, could be completely swapped, interchangeable, completely out. So I just want to say that, because even up until today, Oldboy was in my top 5, and I swapped it out for what's now in my top 5. because I thought, like, I'm going to look a little like pretentious. It's not a movie I can necessarily watch every day. I love it. It's one of my favorites, but it's a hard movie to watch every day. So maybe it shouldn't be in my top 5. But pretty much,
Same rules for me. Yeah.
yeah, all these are completely interchangeable. Pointless that we even have a top 5. So my number 5 is Raiders of the Lost Ark by Steven Spielberg.
Nice.
Every time I watch this, I just think this is such a perfect, wonderful film. It's Harrison Ford, I think, at his finest, especially at his prime of age. I mean, I think he was in his late 20s, early 30s when he did this. He looked good. Everybody looked good in this movie. Everybody, even the guy that would go on to play Gimli, looked good in this movie. The Nazis looked good in this movie. The special effects in this movie are great.
Cancel.
Hey, you don't tell me that you wouldn't put that dress on and the tent for that Nazi. Yeah, and drink with him. He was a smooth man. But yeah, I love this film. I think people who watch it and say that Indy is irrelevant to the plot, I think they kind of don't understand the film, and obviously they probably had never watched a James Bond movie before.
I've never heard that.
Yeah, it's basically the idea is that if Indiana Jones, it doesn't work out. If you really dig into the plot details, not into the story, but into the actual individual details, Indiana Jones is needed for actions to happen, because basically they wouldn't know the height of the staff and the correct time of day to find the tomb where the ark is buried. But anyways, a lot of people say that basically it would just end up on that island and all the Nazis would have died anyways, with or without Indiana Jones. So he's irrelevant to the plot.
The last part is technically true, but overall, no, I don't agree.
No, I don't think they would have gotten it out of the tomb. I don't think they were good enough
No,
archaeologists to get
that's
it
true.
out. So,
Yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah, they probably wouldn't have. Yeah, no, this is an excellent movie. Only thing I can add is this is another movie I saw way later than I should have. I watched it with my wife after she found out I hadn't seen it. She decided that we needed to see it. I loved it. I had to watch it twice because the first time, I really enjoyed it the first time, but the entire time I kept cracking up because all I saw were jokes that Family Guy had made the whole way through. So I kept cracking up the whole way. But no, it's a wonderful film. I can see why it's in your top 5. Very deserving. My number 5 is John Wick, the first one. There's part of me, I still haven't seen 4 yet. I really need to see it. I really need to go to the theater, period. I don't know how long it's been, but that's on my to-do list. I love all the movies of John Wick. I think this one's my favorite, though, because I think it truly encapsulates who he is, but it also does action movies and shoot 'em ups way different than they've been done. Keanu Reeves he gets a lot of crap, and I know some of his roles are a little plain, and the way he talks can seem a little dry at times, but I think he just does an incredible job in this role. He was kind of made for this role, like who he is as a person and how he acts was made for this role. The way that they actually give the villains depth instead of just making them these kind of just generic killers is done wonderfully. I love the interactions between the Russian mob boss and his son. William Dafoe is great in this. Everyone's phenomenal. Of course, the whole motivation behind John Wick, I think, it's so simple behind him coming back out of retirement. It's so simple, and yet it's so perfectly done because it ties into what made him go into retirement. It then is essentially the cause of getting him to come back out of it. Another thing is that basically the dog dying is probably one of the most, it's known by everyone who hasn't even seen the film. When I showed my wife this, she had no idea about that, and so when we were watching it, I made a comment because I didn't know she didn't know. So I just made like a kind of a passing comment, kind of relating to that. And she kind of looked at me. She's like, "Wait, what are you talking about?" And I was like, my eyes bugged out. I was like, "Do you not know what I'm talking about?" And I was like, "We need to stop this movie," because I knew she wouldn't have wanted that surprise. And she's not a blood fan, so we didn't even make it to that point. It's a movie where I can turn my brain off and enjoy it, or I can actually watch it and really analyze it and still enjoy it. Not too many movies can do that.
A lot like The Matrix and a lot like the Raid movies, a good Bruce Lee movie. There's real artistry to the violent ballet in those films, and the gun fu or whatever they call it in John Wick it's spectacular. It's It's I know.
Choreography makes a big difference.
Yeah, it's sleek and sexy. I mean, like, there's no other
Mhm.
word to describe it. It's such a good-looking film because of what happens to his dog. The brutal violence that happens throughout the film feels so justified, and you're on board for everything that happens to these people.
I think
I think
going
personally, I'm a little bit more of a fan of 3. I think that's my favorite one. I think of
three
the
is great.
trail. I haven't seen 4 yet either. I do want to see 4, but I think 3 is the one I go back and rewatch the most. I just love the fight in the horse stable where he's slapping him on the butt and they're kicking the guy. I love that. There's so much slapstick in that one. I really like that, and it's got the
Three is
guys
excellent.
from the raid in it too.
I think the way I would describe it actually in terms of like the fight scene, because for a lot of fights in a movie, just small details can make or break them. If you look at the fight scene in Oldboy when he's kind of fighting off that whole mob,
Yeah.
you know what I'm talking about?
Oh
That one
yeah.
done in the Korean film versus done in the Spike Lee version,
Yes.
night and day. The Korean version is beautiful. It shows his struggles, but it also shows everything he's learned. Whereas the Spike Lee one is basically just a brutal beat 'em up. There's really
Yeah.
nothing there.
There's so many analysis online of just a comparison of those two sequences because it's like the correct way to make a movie and the wrong way to make a movie, and it's shocking that the wrong way is from Spike Lee, who is an accomplished and knowledgeable director.
He's done good
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, but yet not that Old
Um,
Boy remake. No, my number 4 is Casino Royale. I am a huge James Bond fan, and I was going back and forth between putting Casino Royale on here or putting From Russia with Love, because From Russia with Love is my other favorite Bond film, and I think like Casino Royale for me beats it out a little bit more, and it probably is the modern filmmaking techniques. It's a little bit faster paced. You get some crazy, amazing stunts in this film. Mads Mikkelsen is in it. I mean, he's amazing as always.
one of my
But
favorites.
coming out of Die Another Day is probably one of my least favorite Bond films. It's just there's just something about it that just I wasn't a huge Bond fan at the time that I watched it. I'd kind of grown up and really only I'd watched a few of the Sean Connery ones and watched the guy in the 90s. I forgot. Sorry guys, we're recording late at night. I already forgot the guy's name. The guy that did in the 90s.
Pierce.
Pierce Brosnan. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I watched all his movies, saw most of those in the theater as a teenager growing up, and then just Die Another Day. I didn't understand, like I hadn't really ever seen a Roger Moore movie, so it was just kind of like I didn't really like it. Then like Casino Royale just like revitalized me, and just I think that's really what's given me my love for the entire series going back and made me go back and rewatch everything, watch a lot of the Roger Moore stuff for the first time. I'd never really watched that. I love this movie. I think Daniel Craig's amazing. He's amazing physical presence. This is one of the few Bond movies where there's a really strong emotional arc for the character, which I think is interesting. Him and Vesper, that car flip scene is amazing. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
just one of the most cringe inducing, and I'm not saying that as like awkward, but as in like it just makes me cringe every time I watch it.
I
Kind
know
of
you're
like
referring to.
kind of like whenever you peel off somebody's fingernails, is that rope with a knot in it scene as just oof, and just I love that scene though. It's so good.
But Mad and Daniel Craig delivered their performances entirely. They did it perfectly, but in that one scene, they were incredible. I mean, I was doubled over laughing when Daniel Craig told him, "Now you're going to die scratching my balls."
Yeah,
I still laugh like a child when I hear that. It's so great.
it is. Yeah,
Now the whole world's gonna know that you died scratching my balls.
everything
Yeah,
about
this
that.
is
It's amazing how they could make a poker scene tense and
mhm.
exciting. Like yeah, that was yeah. I'm glad they did that, and not Baccarat, which I think is what's in the original novel.
This is probably my favorite Bond film as well. Same thing goes with the Prestige. There's two things that if a movie does it really well, I'm gonna love it, and that's magic and poker. I love seeing those things done well in movies because when they're done wrong, they're terrible. I'm a big fan of Texas Hold'em. I watch the World Series every year. They do an amazing job of keeping every poker hand tense, which is funny because a lot of poker hands are not tense at all. They usually just fold. which is why in movies it can be silly because it's like every hand big and it's like that's not real, but they do it phenomenal in this movie. So my number 4 is one we mentioned briefly early this year, the Banshees of Inisherin. Newer film for the list. I'm guessing probably the newest film on either of our lists, but maybe not. I don't know. I think you are the one who told me to watch this because you had mentioned it on HBO, and I remember watching it. I got home from work, and my wife was still at work. I had a couple hours, so I'm like, I'm gonna go ahead and watch this. I think she walked through the door near the end, and I'm just like sitting on the couch, just like staring at the TV the whole way through. Like I barely even noticed her come in. I'm like, hey, hon, how you doing? I just fell in love with this movie from the moment I watched it. I watched it a couple more times. The scene with the donkey broke my heart. Like I actually felt Colin's pain during
Yeah.
that. And yet at the same time, I was able, like, even though his friend comes across as psychotic, I kind of empathize with him in a weird way. And I think that's really just because of the way he was able to play his character. Everyone in this movie plays their role so well. It's really a story about almost nothing. It's just two friends having a fight. That's really all it comes down to. And yet they're able to take that and make it into something so much bigger than what it is. I know we have the rule about I think like 1 year after the movie for our
Yeah.
thing. So this will probably be on the list somewhere down the line.
I think that was my number 2 favorite
It was
film
up
of
there for
last
you.
year. Yeah, it was definitely my top 5 favorite films of last year. So, yeah, no, I love this one too. I love the writer director Martin McDonald. Is that his? I think that's his name.
Yes, Martin McDonough. Yeah.
Donna. Okay. Yeah. In Bruges, 7 Psychopaths, 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. He's one of those directors that you aren't going to get. You aren't going to get action, but you're just going to get some of the best written dialogue you've ever heard. Like he just knows how to write. He's a playwright, so it makes sense. Much more highbrow than anything on my list.
Yeah.
So my number 3, and we don't have to talk about this a lot because we've talked about it a lot in previous top films, and that is The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing from 1982.
We've discussed this a lot.
I love it. It's one of my favorite films. I'm going to make you watch it one of these days.
I really want to.
It's a fantastic film. The practical effects, every actor in it. It's just an amazing film. Didn't get its due in time, but I think it's become a beloved classic for most people now. So I think it's definitely, for me, it's definitely John Carpenter's best film. Yeah, and I'm a huge John Carpenter fan, so had to have some on the list. Yeah, but go back and watch our top 5 horror if you want to hear us talk about that a whole lot more.
I think you and Darren both had that in your top 5.
Yeah, we did.
I know at some point it's going to be on our list, which is great. I'm all aboard. I think at this point, the only reason I haven't watched it is because I'm trying to find a point where I could just sit down and be completely undisturbed. And so I could just really absorb it because I really want to like experience this film. And I mean, truly experience it, not just kind of watch it. My number 3 is The Hunt with Mads Mikkelsen, not the one that you had mentioned earlier with, what was it? It was like rich people hunting poor people or something like that.
No, it's liberals hunting the conservatives.
Yeah.
But it's a good movie. It's actually got a really interesting message. But yeah, okay. Anyways, so yours is the one from a few years ago, which is on our list in a few episodes from now. We're going to be covering it.
It is. It's by Thomas Vinterberg, starring Mads Mikkelsen. He does a great job. You can watch this and kind of pretend that it's kind of a prequel into Casino Royale. The events of this just make him insane, and he becomes the villain. But in all actuality, it's a wonderful but really kind of heartbreaking story when you really get into it. He's a child care worker. He works for this kind of a preschool-ish. That's not really important, but basically this little girl falsely says that he touched her in a way that he shouldn't have. And they're in a fairly small town, and basically the entire town turns on him. And he's completely like, it's not even a thing of like, did he or didn't he? He did nothing wrong. She basically was just upset because she had a crush on him, and he said, no, I'm an adult. We can't do that. She got her feelings hurt, and she didn't realize what she was saying. And before she could even do anything, it got out of control. So basically, you're watching this town have a very understandable reaction To them, there's some monster in their neighborhood, and at the same time, he's having to deal with being seen as one of the worst kinds of people in society. Him dealing with that struggle, dealing with the few people around him who still love him and trust him, but even you can see, even with them, you can kind of see that they're starting to wonder, did he do this? Did he not do this? It's just a really tragic story because you can see every ounce of pain he's feeling, and it's hard to really pick someone who's wrong because you can't blame the child. She didn't know what she was doing. You can't blame the town because they're right to be upset, even if they should have done a little more investigation. So it's just a very difficult movie to watch, but absolutely worth it in my eyes. Yeah.
No, this has been on my to watch list for a long time. I just never got around to it. So I'm glad you put it on the list. So my number 2 is North by Northwest, the old Alfred Hitchcock film from 1959, starring Cary Grant. It's got the famous crop dusting scene in it, and then the ultimate climax is on the faces of Mount Rushmore. This is one of those movies that I saw as a kid. My mom used to, she was pretty careful and selective on what we watched, and so I would have friends who were watching the Freddy and Nightmare on Elm Street movies, and I'd be like, oh, I just watched this, movie from at the time 40 or 30 years ago, and yeah, no, I used to get made fun of for that, but I think it, instilled a good love and classic cinema to me. And this has always stuck with me. This is one of those movies I at least watch once a year. I love it. I think for me, it's the textbook summer blockbuster. It's what every summer blockbuster I think is trying to be, because there's a romance in it. There's a lot of good humor in it. There's scenes of, high action and high adventure. There's mystery, there's intrigue. Just a fantastic film all around. Cary Grant is he was such a charismatic actor. He just stole every frame when he was on screen. So yeah, it's fantastic to watch. I've forgotten the name of the woman who is his co-lead. I think she was a Bond woman too. Is it Sylvia something? I can't remember. Anyway, so she's fantastic. Yeah, there's a lot of, I think Walter Matthau is in this one too. Like, there's just a lot of really great guys in this. Very, very much worth watching if you've never watched it.
This is one of the few Hitchcock movies I haven't seen yet, but it is on my list for me as well.
No, it's great. We might put it on our list at some point in time.
Fittingly, my number 2 is also a Alfred Hitchcock film. Psycho is my number 2. A little more on the nose, I think, but I talked about this on my top horror movies. I think this is my number 1. I think it's just a phenomenal film. I think it's everything about it. I think is what horror should be, what horror at times tries to be. I think he's obviously known as the master of horror, whatever they call him, for a reason. I think he just did a brilliant job with this film. The way he is able to build tension in a way that we just do not see anymore. I just think it's astounding. I think the film itself is beautiful. The shots are done so well. There's the way they just kind of change the tension, the way they kind of subvert your expectations. I think he does. I think everything about this film, in a way that the way that we were talking about Nolan, the way he is in modern day. I mean, I think Alfred is that for his time. And I think rightfully so.
Yeah, go back, watch our horror top 5 horrors, and you can see everything we had to say about that. So I guess we're on to our number 1. Big number 1.
What you got?
Mine is, so I will say I don't think anything else would have been number 1 on my list. I think this really is my number 1, and it's Mad Max Fury Road.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
I absolutely love this movie. I think it's I don't think it's just one of my favorite. I really think it's one of the greatest films ever made. It understands the language of cinema so well. It is action-packed. It's beautifully shot. It's gorgeous. I mean, you could almost turn this into a silent film and you would understand it. You can mute it. But why would you want to do that? Because the soundtrack is amazing. The sound effects are amazing. Everything is so good. The use of practical and CGI are so beautifully intertwined here, where you can't tell what is going on or what's what. Everything looks so great. It's so well done. And I'm just a sucker for a Mad Max film. I love all four of them. When this one came out, it just blew me away. I think it's great. And I'm a big fan of George Miller too. Even I just recently watched 3,000 Years of Longing. I mean, that was it. That's now in my top 10 movies from last year. I love that movie. So yeah, so George Miller can do no wrong. This movie just proves it in my mind. Just it's fantastic.
I love this movie. It's so fun. Every second of it, it's incredible that it's I don't even know how to describe it. Like it's fast paced and yet is able to tell a fun story at the same time. It's got tons of action, but also great dialogue. It really is like a best of both worlds kind of movie. And again, it's another one where you can just kind of sit back and turn your brain off, or you can really sit there and watch and like analyze it. And either way, you will truly enjoy this movie. My number one, and like you, this my number one is my number one. Like I can change the other films around, but this one is number one. My number one is Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Now, okay, now I get the names mixed up. So which one is this
Not
one?
Charlie, not the new one, the
Okay,
original.
okay. With
Yes,
Gene.
that's
Okay.
yes. Gene Wilder,
Yes.
frankly the only Willy Wonka. There is no other one, as far as I'm concerned.
I love Gene Wilder. He's such a
amazing.
beautiful man.
So this one, growing up, was a film I really enjoyed. Like most people, I just stopped watching after a certain point, just kind of lost track, and then I decided to go back and watch it for nostalgia's sake. And that was when it became my favorite because I realized, oh wow, this isn't just a kid film. This is a great movie. It's not simply nostalgia, it's the way they kind of just bring the beauty out in every scene. The way they make they're able to make something as simple as candy into something so just enjoyable and beautiful. The singing involved in it, which I typically don't really enjoy singing in movies too much, but it's done so perfectly to where it feels like it. You know how in like a lot of like musicals, it kind of feels like the movie stops for the singing.
Hmm.
Whereas in Willy Wonka, it actually feels like it's a real part of that world. Gene Wilder can do no wrong, as you mentioned. His role in the movie is incredible. I thought Charlie did a wonderful job. He didn't seem pretentious as like the one kid who was never wronged. It seemed like it truly seemed like that's who he was. Whereas all the kids who were the bad kids didn't seem like they were trying hard to be that. That seemed like who they were. Everyone did their role. I think the only possible flaw is that the movie hides the real villain, who is Grandpa
Grandpa,
Joe. He's
we
a,
all
he's
know.
a he's a deceptive piece of trash. And also he completely defies medical science. I'm a nurse. You can't be in bed that long and then start dancing. This is he is violating every single like DHEC is going to burn that house to the ground. It is over.
It's going to collapse before they get out there. But yeah.
They probably will. It's not the best film ever made. I would never say that, but it is. I think it's a great film. I think it's one of the all-time greats, and it probably is always going to be my favorite movie. I have watched this countless times, and I get enjoy. I get true joy every time I watch it.
Yeah, I watched it. I hadn't watched it in years. I probably had put it in when I worked at Blockbuster. We used to put movies in to play over the television, and they had to be PG or G.
Sure.
So this is kind of a go-to for us. We would usually put this one in, but I hadn't really watched it in it's almost 20 years now. I hadn't really watched it, and I watched it again last year, and I was struck by how well made of a movie it is, how like just the comedic timing of Gene Wilder
Mm-hmm.
and like the incredibly off kilter madman that he is playing. Like he is he is eating up the role. He's like you know in a candy factory, it shouldn't be weird for someone eating the scenery, but he really is just chewing all of the scenery he can find, and I absolutely loved what he did in that film, man. I mean, for me, probably Young Frankenstein is probably a more favorite of mine in terms of a Gene Wilder performance. I would probably put that ahead of this one, but that's because of my love of Universal films. I think Universal monster
Sure.
films. But yeah, no, this is a beautiful, wonderful film. Yeah, no, it's a wonderful pick. Yeah,
Thank you much.
surprise pick. Yeah. What happened to your sound?
Can you not hear me?
You just went all wonky. Back to,
My headphones just died on me. So.
oh, okay. All right. Well, we
I just don't like you no more.
Good day, sir.